Hello folks, this is Jeff at Divine Cosmos, and this is a reading of my article entitled The Multidimensional Self. As always, my articles are simply my perspective that I share in the spirit of discovery and empowerment. Take what resonates and leave the rest. The Multidimensional Self. Whether you know it or not, you are a multidimensional being of staggering proportions. You are more than meets the eye, much more. More than your body, more than your soul. In fact, you are an integral part of the One Self. You are present on many levels of reality simultaneously and are more powerful than you have ever imagined. Are you ready to expand your concept of selfhood to include higher selves, other and parallel selves, and probable selves? If so, then let's dive in. Most of us are familiar with the idea of the soul, the concept that our bodies are transient physical vessels for an eternal energetic aspect of our consciousness, which is our true essence. Of course, conventional science dismisses this idea. I'm assuming that you probably embrace this idea since you were attracted to read this article. And you're not alone. Many people feel the presence of something greater within themselves. And as the great shift in the consciousness of humanity accelerates, more and more people are feeling it and connecting to it. If we take the existence of some sort of higher aspect of self as a given, then the next question becomes, is our current idea of the soul accurate and complete? There are a growing number of sources that are saying that it is not, that it is overly simplistic, in fact, almost one-dimensional when compared to the new, higher fidelity models being suggested. Some schools of thought subscribe to a very simple model. This model portrays only two entities, source consciousness and souls. This model's most notable element is that the soul is seen as created by, but separate from the creator. This representation is very simple and easy to understand, but it is a gross oversimplification. And the idea that we are separate from Source or God is, well, just plain wrong. Luckily, fewer and fewer people are subscribing to this simplistic model. Another school of thought offers a somewhat more sophisticated model. This model considers the soul a part of a higher or wider entity referred to as the Oversoul, which in turn is part of the all-encompassing Source or God entity. This model is on the right track and hits upon a couple of key elements. We are multi-layered beings, and every layer is a part of and within each successive layer, and all layers are a part of and within the one all-encompassing layer, the top layer that we call Source or God or a number of other terms that have been used. Yet even this model is an oversimplification. Now I just want to say a word of warning here. When you see the term or the word being, think sentient, energetic entity, not physical being. When I use the term being, I am not referring to a physical being unless I say so. The vast majority of beings are non-physical. And it seems like most of us have a tendency to personify the concept of beingness, but this is a mistake. The essence of all beingness is something non-physical. And that's why I will often use the term entity instead of being, because it avoids this misunderstanding and this trap. So while the models that I've presented so far certainly do reflect some aspects of the deeper reality, it's my contention that they are still just gross approximations of the actual situation, the actual structure of consciousness and beingness. In the remainder of this article, I will present a more sophisticated model that is a synthesis of ideas from a number of different sources and expands greatly beyond the models I've just mentioned. This more sophisticated model suggests that we are multidimensional entities present on many levels of reality simultaneously and more powerful than we have been led to believe or have ever imagined. Only a very small portion of your total beingness is present in the physical body that you may have erroneously assumed was the all of you. The you that you identify as you is part of a much bigger entity, which is ultimately also just a small part of the ultimate entity that is all that is. Referred to through the ages by many names: Source, Infinite Creator, Supreme Being, Prime Creator, God, and many other names. You are a multidimensional being of staggering proportions, and in your quest to know yourself and the nature of your existence, you have employed massive parallelism. Higher selves. So what exactly is a soul, and what is its relationship to what some call God and others call source consciousness? If you haven't heard the term source consciousness before, then this may come as a shock to you, but the universe is conscious in its very fabric. The universe is not at all what it appears from our very limited perspective. We exist inside of something resembling a great cosmic mind, often referred to as cosmic or universal consciousness. As the term source consciousness suggests, all consciousness is derived from the universal field of consciousness. The consciousness of each and every one of us is an individualized thread of this universal consciousness. This is what your soul is. It's a thread of universal consciousness with an associated repository of experiential information, local memory, and derivative ideas, all somehow encoded as a pattern of energy. Our soul is sentient energy, as is the entire universe. Here's what Story Waters, from his The One Self teachings, has to say about this. There is only one consciousness in all existence. The consciousness that I know as myself is the same consciousness that you know as yourself. Source consciousness is the intelligence that created our universe, and it indirectly created all our souls. One of the fundamental capabilities of consciousness is the ability to subdivide itself, to create smaller individualized copies of itself within itself. Source used this mechanism to create the first level of subthreads of its consciousness, what in effect could be thought of as sub-selves. It did this to explore and experience manyness rather than oneness, but more importantly, as a strategy to accelerate the exploration of itself and existence and its evolution. The mechanism that source consciousness used to accomplish subdivision and individuation of its consciousness was primarily that of lowering the frequency of portions of its energies, stepping them down into the lower frequency bands of the energetic field. This is a part of the reason why subdivisions of consciousness operate somewhat independently of, yet are inherently part of and connected to the higher consciousness that spawned them. They are simply portions of the parent sentient energies at a significantly lower frequential level. The subdivisions of consciousness that Source created within itself, in a very real sense, can be considered its sub-selves. And here's the really cool part. Anything that a sub-self experiences is also experienced by its parent or higher self, and thus forms the basis for an evolutionary strategy. Massively parallel experiences. The process of subdivision of consciousness is a general capability, and it can and has been repeated by the subselves at each level of consciousness, and for the same reasons, to accelerate their evolution, and thereby contributing to Source's evolution. Consciousness is like a multi-level branching structure. If we use the analogy of a tree, then Source consciousness would be the tree trunk. The tree trunk then divides into many large branches, which keep subdividing into smaller and smaller branches until we get to the twigs, and each twig has a leaf attached to the end. In this model, we can think of the leaves as the physical bodies. And then as we move from the leaf towards the trunk, we would encounter the soul level, and then the oversoul level, and then a number of additional levels till we reach the tree trunk coming out of the ground, which would be the Source level. If you're reading the article or watching the video, you can see the diagram. And note that even though the diagram shows 7 levels, it's actually unclear how many levels there really are, or whether all the branches have to have the same number of levels or divisions. The only thing that's for sure is that there are more than 3 levels, probably many more. A number of sources indicate there is a level above the oversoul that has been referred to as the soul group level. Keep in mind that the labels we use for each of these levels is quite arbitrary, and because the number of levels is indeterminate, you'd have a hard time figuring out different names for each level. Some people simply use the term oversoul for every single level, and you could just number them. So if you're reading the article or watching the video, you'll see a diagram illustrating this divisional structure of universal consciousness that I'm talking about. You've got Source at the highest level. It subdivides into n sub-selves, and each of those subdivide into n sub-selves, so on and so forth, till you get to the point where you're looking at the level with these soul group entities. The name may not be that appropriate. They are simply conscious entities who can then subdivide into oversouls, and each oversoul subdivides into one or more souls, and those souls can then connect to or bind with the physical body. According to some sources, there are 2,135 soul groups participating in the Earth experience right now. It's unclear how many soul group entities exist within Source in total. Probably many, many, many more. Each soul group entity is able to subdivide itself into up to 144,000 oversoul entities. And each oversoul entity is able to create up to 12 souls. And believe it or not, the soul can subdivide into up to 12 soul extension entities. A soul extension is just another subdivision of consciousness which allows connection to physical vehicles, to our bodies, in the very lowest frequency bands. The consciousness that connects to a body to drive it has to be within a certain distance frequentially to achieve the connection and have a functional connection. So if you do the math, this leads to potentially 44 billion incarnate entities or beings on Earth. So an oversoul creates one or more souls for the purpose of connecting to physical bodies in the physical planes of existence, the lower frequency bands of the universe. A physical body is simply a vehicle that the soul uses to have physical experiences. Physical life provides unique and highly formative experiences that are much sought after by a wide variety of non-physical beings. Physical experience, while challenging, is a spiritual evolution fast track and is highly coveted. The 12 by 12 subdivisional structure of the oversoul allows each oversoul to have up to 144 subselves that each can bind to physical bodies for 144 parallel physical lives. And of course, one of these 144 subselves and its body is you. The higher self, the true self. Amongst those people that embrace that they have a soul, many are still overly identified with their body as their identity. Even those people that embrace the soul as their true identity may be missing a deeper appreciation of the true scope of their wider, higher self. Despite the fact that some use the term higher self as a synonym for oversoul, I think it's better used to refer to all the levels of self, all the way up to and including source. If you're listening to this within the article or watching the video, there's a diagram that illustrates this idea. This diagram illustrates the parent-child chain all the way from the bottom where your soul is connected to a physical body, and then the soul is a child of an oversoul, and the oversoul is a child of a soul group, and so on and so forth, until finally the final highest parent is source consciousness itself. So, in a very real sense, source consciousness is your highest self. Your body, and in a sense, even your soul, were created as a transient, sentient entity to serve as an experiential and evolutionary vehicle for your oversoul. So in a very real sense, you could consider the oversoul that spawned your soul as your true self. And your oversoul is an immensely wise and powerful being that is always trying to encourage you to create the best experiences for yourself and to become the highest version of yourself. Why? Because you are a part of it, and it is experiencing and learning through you. At this point, you might be wondering, if this is true, why don't I know it? Why don't I feel it? This is a very good question. When your soul incarnates, when it connects to the physical vehicle, to the body, it loses its memory of its greater existence. This veil of forgetting is intentional. It makes the earth game a fully immersive and truly formative experience. The game of life would not be the same if you knew it was just a game. We also lose a lot of the fidelity of our connection to our higher self, our oversoul and source, etc. This is an unavoidable consequence of incarnating into the lower frequency planes of existence, the physical planes. Our earthly level of consciousness is at a frequency that is so much lower than that of our higher self that any stream of information coming down is subject to a large reduction of fidelity due to the frequency step down required. Yet we could still have a very good connection with our higher self if it wasn't for one thing: our raging ego. The constant chatter of our ego and analytical mind creates so much mental noise that we simply can't hear the inner guiding voice of our higher self. Essentially, the signal-to-noise ratio is so low that the information coming from our higher self gets drowned out. Hence, most people on Earth have almost totally lost their connection with their higher self and have completely forgotten what they really are. What does it take to reestablish a clear connection to your higher self? Well, for one thing, it takes a clear and quiet mind. One must quell the constant chatter of the analytic and egoic mind and the fear and worry that dominate it. Another thing that helps is to reduce your busyness. The constant distractions of our hectic daily lives don't leave much space for the presence of our higher self. Making more time for solitude and meditation is a great start. More about this in future articles. Follow the blog if you'd like to stay tuned. Even though the loss of connection with our higher self could be seen as a bad thing, it actually serves one of the reasons why we devised the game of life in the first place: to experience separation from our source and to see what we could learn from that, what that could teach us. Separation from the source of our beingness, separation from the knowing that we are all parts of one consciousness, of one great being, and we are all completely interconnected and interdependent and integral to the one. With training, you can actually learn how to move the locus of your consciousness to any level of your wider, higher self. You can move your locus of awareness to your soul, or to the oversoul level, or even up to the source level, and perceive from that higher perspective. In fact, you can move your locus of consciousness, or your point of awareness, to anywhere in the infinite matrix that is the conceptual information space of the universal field of consciousness. More on this in future articles. Follow the blog to stay tuned. Other selves, parallel selves, and many lives. From the perspective of your oversoul, the higher you, all the souls that it created and their extensions that are connected to physical bodies could be considered your other selves. By some accounts, this can be up to 144 parallel incarnations. And regardless of whether that exact number is correct, we can safely say that the higher you is experiencing many lives in parallel. And since at the end of a life, the sentient energy that was connected to a body can be reused with another body, your oversoul has experienced far more incarnations than this, perhaps thousands. This is why your oversoul is so wise. It's the sum of all the wisdom gleaned from a vast amount of experiences. Your many incarnations can be anywhere in the physical universe. Any planet, any galaxy, any time period, past, present, or future. Just as an aside, our conception of time is wrong. Time is an illusion, but that's another story. Go to the blog and check out my article on the illusion of time and space for more about that. And your incarnation could be in any one of the planes of physical reality. What are planes of physical reality? Check out my article entitled Parallel Realities and the Multidimensional Universe to learn more about that. But since you are having an Earth experience right now, It is very likely that many of the other lives that the higher you is having are also here on Earth, probably in other time periods. The Earth reality system provides challenging yet highly formative experiences that are appropriate for fairly advanced beings. So if you're currently engaged here, then it is very likely that most of your other selves are here as well, because anything less would be boring. If you're listening to this as a part of the article on the blog or watching the video, there's a diagram that highlights all the parallel incarnations associated with a given oversoul. Past and future lives. Using a technique known as past life regression, you can actually visit or see your other lives. And by see, I mean have an inner experience of. This is done by going into a trance state via hypnosis or deep relaxation, and then being guided by suggestion or your own intent to visit the experiences of your other selves, your other lives. In the trance state, the earthly mind is quieted, and one can perceive from the vantage point of any level of one's higher self and sense the experiences of any of their parallel lives. All these experiences are recorded in the energy information field of your higher self and are accessible if you center the focus of your consciousness in one of the levels of your higher self. Depending on the level, you may, quote, see the lives experienced by your soul or your oversoul or even higher levels of yourself. The term past life regression is a bit of a misnomer since your other lives are all actually happening simultaneously and can be in any time period, past or future. If visiting a future life seems illogical or impossible to you, then you're probably going to want to check out my article on the illusion of time and space. In the many thousands of regressions that have been done, many have reported seeing portions of lives that were clearly in the future rather than in the past. Most people focus on exploring their past lives because with our erroneous conception of linear time, we think that the past is recorded and therefore potentially can be explored, but the future hasn't happened yet, so it doesn't exist, it hasn't been recorded, and it can't be visited. But that's wrong. Like I said, check out The Illusion of Time and Space for more about this. There are also many people who have reported experiences from what could be called the interlife period, the time between lives, between physical incarnations. A common report from some of these experiences is that our many lives are all somehow happening at once. Yet other people have reported an apparent sequential process of coming out of one life, reviewing it, planning the next one, and then starting the next one, which seems to contradict the all-at-once reports. This contradiction is likely due to the fact that nonlinear concepts are very hard for our earthly minds to understand and express, so we will often map those parallel or concurrent concepts into the closest linear explanation we can understand. If you'd like to dive deeper into the topic of past life regression, I recommend a couple of books. If you are listening to this audio on the blog, then you can go to the bottom of the article and those books will be listed and links to those books will be listed. If you are watching this as a video, you can go to the video description and those books will be listed. Probable selves, parallel selves, and many life paths. Another way that your higher self accelerates its evolution through the use of parallelism is to experience all possible life paths. Have you ever wondered what would have happened if you made a different choice at a critical juncture in your life? Well, so did your soul. But instead of just wondering, your soul subdivides its consciousness yet again, creating a sub-thread of its consciousness to follow and experience each alternate life path. At every decision point of any significance, one portion of your soul's sentience follows branch A, and another follows branch B. Your soul is experiencing all possible or probable life paths in parallel. The you that you think of as you is simply a sub-thread of your soul that is experiencing one particular branch of the life path decision tree. At every significant decision point on a life path, the path branches. A decision tree represents all possible paths. All of these are experienced by your soul. This mechanism creates a massively parallel experience which maximizes the evolutionary potential for the soul and for the oversoul and for source. Since all experiences are experienced by your higher consciousness, they trickle up. The soul threads that follow each of the possible paths of experience could in a sense be called probable selves, because there is one for each possible or probable life path. These probable selves are all very real, and so are all the alternate experiences they are having. And it is all being accumulated by your higher levels of self. Imagine how much one could learn by experiencing every possible life alternative and all their outcomes. You would learn and grow extremely fast. And that's the reason why we designed the process this way. And by we, I mean some higher level of ourselves. The highest self, the one self. Once you understand and embrace the multidimensional nature of your beingness, your perspective expands greatly. You may begin to see yourself not as the body and the ego that's running around here on earth, but as your true essence, your eternal higher self. You might even embrace that in a very real sense, your highest self is source consciousness, God. And an even greater realization may come over you. The realization that since the consciousness of all entities, of all beings, are ultimately threads of source consciousness, and hence we are all parts of the one universal consciousness, that in a very real sense, there is only one self. All levels of consciousness and all loci or locuses of consciousness and beingness are ultimately within and integral parts of source consciousness, of universal consciousness, of the one great beingness. And this one being is your highest self. So in a sense, all beings could be considered yourself. This is why it makes sense to treat all beings with the utmost respect, care, encouragement, etc. Because it's all you. That's it, folks. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper into some of the concepts that I discussed in this article, check out the books that I recommended. If you're listening to this audio as a part of the blog article, you can find those books listed at the bottom of the article. And if you're watching this in the form of a video, You'll find those books listed in the video description. If you liked this article, please consider sharing it with others and consider subscribing to my blog so you can get notified when I post new articles.